Sounds good to me.
I used to singing, baby. Oh, come around, why don't you come around? Why don't you come around? Why don't you
good if you know me.
come around? Why don't you come around? Why don't you sing about a melody? Oh, come around, why don't you come around? Why don't you come around? Why don't
You good if you know me.
come around? Why don't you come around? Why don't you anything you want to sing about? Just sing it on out now, sing it on out. Let the world know what life's all about. Come around, why don't you come around? Why don't you come around? Why don't you come around? Come around, why don't you come around? Why don't you sing about a melody? Oh, come around, why don't you come around?
Okay, I kind of came into the beat late. It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? My bad. And whatnot. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. This is DSP News, the unreliable ones. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the newsroom and welcome to the Goutopia News Network, your unreliable source for DSP News. This is the pseudo Snort Report, brought to you by SnortBucks Coffee Company, the best beverage company. Let's go. How you guys doing? I guess you could say this is kind of a report, but it really isn't. This is something that I've been watching over like the last 2 weeks. And and I thought I would jump in on it because it's actually a really good discussion point, to be honest. I think that's the whole point of all this. So it's not about trying to bash anybody or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody has the right to their opinions and so on and so forth. But I think this is a good discussion point, to be honest. And since on the Fight Club channel we're essentially already going over Phil's FGC history anyway, this right here kind of coincides in a very good way. All right, so I'm going to go over a clip essentially that came from Phil's stream last night, his throwback Street Fighter stream, which the second part of it, as far as I know, is missing for whatever reason. I guess he deleted it or so on and so forth. So we're over here with Raw DSP, also known as DarkDave Mirrors. The link to the entire stream will be down in the description. Okay. So here's how the scenario works. Last week, LSB, Lightside Bill, you guys all know him. He, and big ups to him and Rocky, he was doing his typical restream and whatnot, or his weekly restream, I should say, of Street Fighter. And it came up, I only saw the clip, I didn't get to see it in its entirety yet. But someone brought up the fact that, yeah, Phil isn't as good as he says he was, as he says he is, and that should be painfully obvious to everybody. And LSB, not wanting to come across like he was just bashing Phil for the sake of bashing Phil, which is a statement that he made to some extent, was like, no, for someone who has played for as long as he has and for his placements or whatnot, he considers him above average. And I don't think they came down on him. He just got pushback. It's just what's going to happen. It's the reality of the situation. Now, to be very clear, he wasn't saying, or he wasn't talking about Phil's FGC history as a whole. He just meant, I think he just meant Super Turbo. So that's where our starting point is. That conversation kind of sorta carried over to this week because Phil, obviously, since LSB is the new Tevin, essentially Phil is looking to try to take shots at LSB at any chance that he can get. At the beginning of Phil's stream, the unrecorded part of it, I should say, he talked about, someone had referenced in the comment section about how do you feel about people attacking the validity of your EVO win in 2005, and how it was on a shitty port, also known as the NeoGeo port, and how does that make you feel that people don't actually give it the respect that it deserves? And we're going to hear about that right now. The point of this broadcast, ladies and gentlemen, is to open up the conversation, open up a bit of dialogue to what is the reality, if you will, of the situation, of what is Phil's accomplishments or past accomplishments or whatever the case may be, and what is our current situation. That's what I hope to be able to start that bit of dialogue. Here's the reality and whatnot. Now, like I said, LSB was being reasonable about it, and doesn't want to bash him, so on and so forth. I get that, I respect that. As for me, I'm gonna bash the fuck out of Phil all day. I'm gonna bash the fuck out of Phil all day because I've actually seen the tournament results. I've seen where his standings were in Phil's heyday. Not all of it. Let me admit that. it's still a work in progress. It's still a sword that I'm still sharpening. But Phil wasn't that good. That was being said by his peers back then. Period. You know what I'm saying? That whole King of Hate moniker stems from the fact that he wanted respect. He wanted to be recognized by his peers, and they weren't doing it because he felt like he could take any little thing and throw it in people's face. The fact that EVO 2005 was his first and only top 8, or well, not top 8. That's not true. Well, no, it is his only top 8 finish. It is his only top 8 finish. Now I think about it, because he never placed higher than that at any EVO afterwards. EVO Worlds, I should say, or the EVO Nationals, I should say. Let's not talk. I'm not talking about his qualifiers that he has gone to, clout chasing, which is what it was, by the way. It was him running around to a bunch of fucking qualifiers, the clout chase, to gatekeep, if you will, which meant nothing anyway, because, ladies and gentlemen, you could still go to EVO's main tournament for Super Turbo, Third Strike, or whatever the case may be, and you didn't have to go to a qualifier. Qualifiers just gave you better seating. That's all. And the more qualifiers you go to and win doesn't increase your seating odds. It doesn't move you up further and further. That was him running around clout chasing. That was him being pissed off because in 2005 people bashed his placing, and people said they didn't give a shit and they didn't validate it and no one took it seriously, and that was really because he was a dumbass and went up there on shoryuken.com and everywhere else that people would listen and be like, I was the one who won that tournament. I was the highest ranking North American player that year. Now, that's another discrepancy people forget. He essentially was running around saying that he actually won that tournament, even though he didn't. And then he backtracked and said he was the #1 ranked Super Turbo player. That's another small little discrepancy that some people forget about. He tried to pass it off as if he won the tournament, but he didn't. And then, to make it even more hilarious, as it pertains to character selections and so on and so forth, the very characters he used to try to cheese that tournament were the very characters that were turned against him later by the Japanese. And they didn't have nearly as much experience with the game. They picked up, they adapted, and they overcame. That's what happened. Now, we'll talk about, as this video goes on, more of the discrepancies or how the actual scenario blew about. But that was the reality, to be honest. Now, as it pertains to all these other tournaments that Phil has allegedly, he was on that 2-year tear, I'm sorry. All those other tournaments he went on and he was placing high if he didn't outright win them. He didn't win many of them. That's the first thing. And yes, he did have some top 8 finishes. Good for him. Didn't win them though. Didn't win them. So excuse me, him and tying for 7th or whatnot, or being in top 10 means jack shit of what? And then, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you this now. I want to impress this on you as we move forward. I want you to think about people that you see on LSB streams each and every week who play Phil. I'm talking about your Goji tanks. I'm talking about your Ronins, your sometimes Lady Gambit, your Mavericks, all these people. Are these people tournament players? No. More than likely they're not. More than likely these people are much younger than Phil. These people don't have Phil's know-how or knowledge with Street Fighter. I would say more than likely. These people are regular people who play casually. A lot of the people that you see on LSB stream are people who picked up and started playing because they thought it was going to be funny to troll Phil. Or maybe they had some previous experience in some of those games and decided to pick it back up. Those same people that you have seen hand Phil his ass. So the concept, or the idea, if you will, that, oh, Phil has been playing for such and such amount of time in Super Turbo and whatnot, how many of us here could actually beat him? Oh, I don't know. How many of you guys were willing to put the time in to do so? And more importantly, look at the people who already have, and look at their results. Phil isn't unbeatable. Nobody is. And LSB streams prove that. So, despite Phil's knowledge, despite his experience, you see people who pop in there week in, week out. Certainly prior to Phil going on hiatus, if you will, and were making strives. They were making strives, real strives, and not just in Third Strike, but in Super Turbo, which are the only 2 games out of the 4 that Phil is probably worth a damn in anyway. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Yet again, this is really just an open discussion, to be honest with you, because I'd like to gauge. I'd like to go ahead and take the temperature and see what the thought process is. There is no right or wrong answer as it pertains to how good Phil is or he isn't, so to speak, right? Because perception is reality. So you can only go off what you know, right? You can only go off what you see. With that being said, if you're someone who restreams Phil, you've seen the progression of people in the Detractor FGC and whatnot. You've seen some of the casuals take him on. And outside of, I can't think of that dude's name, my apologies, but that one like top-ranked player Phil ran into that one time and got completely and utterly destroyed, you've seen more and more casual players come into the mix and beat Phil down. So in actuality, what did all that tournament experience really mean? What was it really worth? What value did it actually have? Or does it have? Especially when he doesn't have the reactions and reflexes to go along with it. And with the limited brain capacity that he has, he's not even able to put the information that he knows to use. That's why he runs around and chases scrubs all goddamn night. That's the reason why, at least last week, for example, he sat there and jumped into, what was it, like an Alpha 3 lobby and forced those guys to play Super Turbo because it was safe. It's the reason. It goes back to the days of Evil AJ or Rugal Bernstein, if you will, and how Phil tried to play him, lost, not all of them, but lost the majority of them, and then started running from him. No one has to co-sign or try to, you know what I'm saying, compliment that. You know what I'm saying? What his socially, he's not there. He's a scumbag who only goes out, looks for the cheap wins with the least amount of resistance, trying to hold on to some shit that happened 16 years ago. You know what I mean? Or within the last 16 years, if you will. Gloating about his experience from the last like 25 years ago, which neither one of them means jack shit if you can't actually work it in the current day and age. He's still bitching and complaining about shit when it comes to online play that he was doing back in like 2008, 2009. Anyway, let's go in, let's listen to the clip. Like I said, I'm just trying to open up some dialogue on it. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to be spending the better part of the year on the Fight Club channel, tearing through most of this shit anyway. So this was kind of a bit of a godsend, so to speak, when it comes to a situation on a much larger scope, I guess, if you will, because not everybody's into the DSP lore. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'll see you guys in just a second. And big ups, everybody. Happy 2021. Even though it hasn't started off well. It certainly hasn't started off well.
Sing about a melody. Sing it on out now, sing it on out. Let the world know what life's all about.
Okay. The Man of Orange tipped me $2, said, is it usual criticism that your win at EVO was not authentic because it was a NeoGeo port valid or stupid? It wasn't a NeoGeo port. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Super Turbo, I don't think...
Alright, big ups to, I think it's Raw DSP / DarkDave mirrors and whatnot. The link to the original stream, yet again, will be down in the description. Now, the NeoGeo port is a pun that Mike Watson coined back in like that might have been like 2008, 2009. It was something. It was like SoCal. It was like a SoCal regional event. That it was a panel. It was him, John Choi, and Alex Valle. I don't remember the exact year, so my apologies. I know Evil AJ actually has the original video on his channel. So that's a thing to go ahead and check out if you guys ever get a chance. But that's where he coined it. Now, a lot of the reason why people tear down the 2005 fourth place finish is one, because it's fourth. And nobody ever gloats about fourth. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's actually really pathetic, to be honest. So that's the first thing. When that didn't work, then Phil did something that certainly was never done up to his point and certainly hasn't been done since, in the fact that he was the #1 ranked North American player that year. Now, excuse me, some of that gloating, if you will, or goat, not goat laughing, but goat heckling, if you will, personal heckling, I should say, because he's kind of taking a jab at himself while trying to praise himself at the same time. But whatever. A lot of that nonsense. This actually, it's self-induced pignosis. That's really what it is. Because heckling is kind of looked at as a negative sort of thing, depending on how you take it. But whatever. We don't need to go ahead and go back to what Kramer from Seinfeld did all those years ago. The situation with where he ended up getting the #1 ranked North American player stems from SBO, or Super Battle Opera, where North American players would go over there, they would do really well, and sometimes they won, sometimes they lost, and when they came back, people would praise them about, oh, well, you did well, you know what I'm saying? You at least made it this far, you know, it's further than most people would have made, or most teams would have made, and so on and so forth, so that's a big ups. But no one ever ran around praising that. You know what I'm saying? No one ever tried to stand on that as their end-all be-all. Phil did. Which only shows how weak he was up till his EVO placing in 2005, and certainly over a decade, almost 15 years, he's tried to defend it since then. You know what I mean? It was bad. It was just really bad optics. It was really pathetic. Like, you know what I'm saying? If he wanted to get some praise for it, or even to be congratulated in some way, shape, or form, I'm sure people would have been willing to do so, but he demanded it. He demanded respect before people even had a reason to give it to him. And then he spent the next 2 or 3 years trying to chase it and never got anywhere close. If you honestly believe that him taking some regionals, some EVO qualifiers, I should say, taking some EVO qualifiers the following years justifies and reinforces his placement at that EVO 2005, then why didn't he win? Like, why didn't he place any better in the years that came later on? What held him back? And keep in mind, we're talking about a console port, right? A shitty port. Each and every year that happened afterwards, they continued to be on other ports for consoles, right? You know what I'm saying? So he was running around boasting, because I think like 2016 may have been his real run, where it was another anniversary collection or another anniversary edition, one of the two. Because he got into a fight with Bumpkin about that on, what is that called? I just saw it recently or semi-recently on Kiwi Farms. Alphaism Radio, which is what the name of Bumpkin's show is. And then I guess Ski Sonic used to be on that too. And then that ended up going into Wake Up Shoryuken, or Wake Up SRK, which is another version, if you will, a souped up version of that same show, of that same radio type show situation, which is, if you could find it, those are pretty good listens. Why, and Bumpkin called him out on that shit. He said, you were supposed to be the anniversary edition specialist. Why couldn't you get shit done? Why couldn't you get it? Why couldn't you make shit happen? Why are you running around calling Taquito a scrub, yet Taquito cleaned your ass up? He cleaned up Justin. He cleaned up all these guys. And Phil actually used that as a defense. You know, I wasn't the only one that was beat. All these other top players got beat too. Then that means the guy isn't a scrub, right? If your only shield for you losing is, he beat all these other well-known or tournament-tested players, or even tournament champions, So, you know, my loss shouldn't be so bad because these guys lost too. Then why the hell are you running around calling the guy a scrub when he's sitting here beating tournament winners or former tournament winners? And then that's when Phil ended up shutting the fuck down because he didn't have nothing to say. He basically wrapped himself up in his own pig in the blanket. He screwed himself over. Because once he gets emotional, he don't know how to think. And then he just comes across as, he really just comes across as just being stupid, bitter, and vindictive, which is exactly what it was. Just like how he lies and says, oh, I didn't watch the year Taquito won EVO. I think it was Street Fighter V. I didn't watch that year. Of course he did. He watches every year. He watches every year. Or he follows people on Twitter who follow pro players, which is the reason why he's up in all of that drama in the first place. We'll go over the Gutex thing. That'll be coming up. We'll go because that's really. I don't know why people would feel the need to defend this guy. That right there just goes to show exactly how vindictive Phil is. That's no different than Pro Jared, all over again. And then he tried to campaign off of that dead woman's back, right? Because sadly, a woman lost her life out there. He tried to campaign off that dead woman's back to be like, oh, well, you guys should make me the universal. I should be the new universal emote now. Like, if you had a problem with what Gutex said, that's cool. I get that. I understand that. But then to sit there and try to capitalize off a dead person and go ahead and try to get yourself some clout is disgusting. Is fucking disgusting. Just like that Etika situation. Trying to get himself some clout and get himself a lot of sympathy because he feels like he was bullied. Same shit. But yet we feel the need to defend him. Right? Like, people still feel the need to defend him. And more often than not, he brings this type of garbage upon himself. But we'll talk about that in that video. We'll talk about that there and whatnot. Let's go ahead and continue with this nonsense.
Or even on NeoGeo, because NeoGeo is an SNK console. Why would a Capcom game be on it? No, the port was a PS1 port. And at the time, it was the only mainstream console version outside of Dreamcast, but they didn't want to use it.
But in truth, though, if it was on the NeoGeo, it might have actually been the closest thing to Arcade Perfect outside of what was on the GameCube. Or not GameCube, Dreamcast. Because I think it's universally accepted that the fighting games that were on Dreamcast were Arcade Perfect. So, which is the reason why the FGC used it for as long as it did. And especially the Marvel vs. Capcom 2... the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 community. Excuse me. They lived and died by the Dreamcast port because the PS2 port was garbage. It was absolute garbage. And CVS 2, I mean, even though CVS 2 was on the PS2, it's still really good on Dreamcast as well. And Third Strike, obviously Third Strike as well. But tomato. There are. I mean, it's really hard to find a Dreamcast now. And people were buying up new Dreamcasts as well as older Dreamcasts so they would have, you know, a bunch of them for tournaments and so on and so forth. And you got to be careful because people have to use emulators for their or certain adapters for their arcade sticks and whatnot, or even controllers. And if you bump the Dreamcast in the wrong type of way, it can automatically force a reset. There are some, you know, drawbacks.
Because they felt that the Dreamcast was the no reliable console at the time. So, which it wasn't. They ended up using Dreamcast for Marvel 2 anyway. But,
well, there's a reason for that too. And when like I said, with Marvel, the Marvel community figured shit out. But on top of that, there was a very unique thing that people started making, which were the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 custom. They were making like custom games, if you will. Like there'd be like custom colors of the of different Marvel characters and whatnot. Like people would go in and like go pixel by pixel and change the colors in all these type of unique and really cool ways. But not only that, but people figured out a way to extract the existing game music files and insert their own ones, which was really, really cool. And I'm sure you can probably still, if you're really willing to look, you could probably still find some online that you could download and whatnot, and you could put it onto a Dreamcast if you have one. And or you can go back and look at old tournaments. I think the first tournament that it was introduced that these custom Marvel vs. Capcom 2 discs were distributed around and actually publicly shown, I think, was probably Seasons Beatings, is what they end up calling it. They end up changing the name later, but I think it's called Seasons Beatings. It was like, for Marvel, it was considered like the #2 tournament of the year after EVO. To be honest, like, it was, because I'm pretty sure it took place after Evolution, and that was like a big meetup. It was like a big thing, like the best of the best of the best of Marvel's of Marvel players go out there after EVO, especially if they couldn't go to EVO. So it was a real big thing. It's definitely more of a, like a, I mean, don't get me wrong, there was big money and there was a lot of betting and so on and so forth, but it was really more of like a bragging rights type thing. But it's something that people really enjoyed doing. It was quite the event. You know what I'm saying? People had a pretty good time. I think Sanford Kelly and Duck Doe had a bit of a confrontation there. They didn't come to blows or anything, but it was messy. I remember seeing that in some old videos and whatnot. But that's the thing. But so, for at least for the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 community, it was the best version that they had. Plus, they could go in and modify it or edit it. At least the colors and the music and so on and so forth. So it was a reason to keep playing it. You know what I mean? But that's just, you know, a thing.
One version, and was it illegitimate? No. What it was different. It had different things to it that if you practiced it, you would have learned the differences. That's exactly what I did. Everyone was complaining, we want arcade. I complained that year too that I wanted arcade. I publicly said on srk.com, everyone was complaining, we want arcade. I complained that year too that I wanted arcade. I publicly version, and was it illegitimate? No. What it was different. It had different.
Okay, let me stop him right there. Sorry about, I had to jump back twice. Was it illegitimate? No. Was it different? Yes. No, he's lying. It was illegitimate. It was universally illegitimate. The reason why it was illegitimate, because one, and these are some of the same things that some of these things are the things that Phil bitches about. Game speed was a problem. Damage output was inconsistent for certain characters and for certain moves. I mean, Jesus Christ, there are situations where certain characters like Guile can have like 2 projectiles out on stream at once. M. Bison's Psycho Crusher can do ridiculous damage, like way more damage than it's supposed to. Like, you're almost like on, not necessarily on some hacking type shit, but it could seem game breaking. Like, it's really ridiculous. The chip damage was inconsistent. There's a lot of problems. There's a whole lot of problems. The fact that he's still defending it after all these years is fucking disgusting. And the fact that he knows damn well that port was a problem. It was a mess. It was a mess. You know what I mean? Like, think about all of the bitching and complaining he does in 30th Anniversary, which is what he's playing now. You could literally apply some of that, outside of the online element with the lag and everything, onto the PS1 port that he was playing, and most of it would apply. Most of it. Not all of it, obviously, because some of those excuses he just pulls out of his ass. Like, he comes up with excuses for 30th Anniversary I've never heard before, so I know he didn't see none of that stuff on Twitter. He must have made it all up. Which, the fact that you have to constantly keep inducing self-pignosis on yourself is incredible. But that's a whole nother story for another day. There was just a lot of problems. And because of that, people immediately boycotted it, or people wanted it to be cabinet play. And those who couldn't get that, they immediately boycotted it. And then the majority of people who walked into that tournament knew how bad it was, knew how inconsistent it was, and still decided to play just for the fun of it. And that's what it really came down to. It really came down to Phil going in there tryharding when most of the competition knew that the port was garbage, didn't take it seriously, and just had a good time with it. That's what it really came down to. It's like Phil going out there and trying to play against a bunch of elementary school kids, because they're not taking it seriously. They're just legit playing for fun. But he was out there tryharding because this was his only shot. It was his only shot, because Phil is all over SRK at that time, and he's hearing people saying, yeah, I'm not going to play it. I'm not going to... Even the ones who didn't want to boycott the tournament, they were like, yo, I'm not going to play it. It's no big deal. It's whatever. You know what I'm saying? I'll go ahead and just, do some money matches or whatever. It's not a big loss for a lot of people. And then you had that group of people who were like, I'm just going to play it for fun. No biggie. and whatever, you had a lot of people who were like, oh, well, the differences were probably not going to be that drastic. So who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? We'll probably place high anyway. We may even get into the money. It's whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a bunch of different variables that were floating around. But for Darksydephil, you're looking at it and being like, the majority of my competition either aren't going to take it seriously or not even going to go. Or not even going to play, I should say. This is an easy win. This is an easy win. And he must have thought he has some advantage over those Japanese players, which didn't happen. They passed him around like crispy roasted pork, and he got beat. But that's the reason why he sits on it, because it was his only shot. And history proves that. He's so quick to run around and say, look at my tournament results after the fact, but you never won an EVO. And your qualifiers mean jack to what? Okay, great. You won some qualifiers. Great. You beat Justin once, maybe twice. I don't know. Well, I think it's in this clip. Who cares? Like at the end of the day, you're trying to take these small little things, right? And you're taking these small little pebbles and you're trying to make it into a wall. You're taking this small pile of pebbles and you're trying to say, this is a wall. Praise me for it. And that's not enough. When you went ahead and went to all those qualifiers to go to EVO to win, and you didn't do it. You couldn't do it. That's where the problem lies. Let's go.
Practice it, you would have learned the differences. That's exactly what I did. Everyone was complaining, we want arcade. I complained that year too that I wanted arcade. I publicly said on srk.com, SureYouCan.com, I think that it should be arcade version. But EVO outright denied it and said over and over, no, we're doing PS1 version. Everyone said, well, that's fucking stupid. I agreed. I said, but you know what? Instead of sitting here and bitching, I'm going to actually play that version and learn it and then play it in the tournament. So I did. I played the shit out of that version both at home and then when I went to the tournament for like 2-3 straight days, I just practiced the PS1 version. So when I actually got to the
now that part I wanted you to take into account, because not only did he grind out that version at home, right? But then he spent the few days at EVO grinding that shit out as well. Looking for the cheap shit, looking for what can be abused. Now, one, how are you going to bitch and complain? How are you going to bitch that these people were bitching when you were right there bitching with them? You just admitted that. But then you were like, you're bitching with them knowing damn well that you're going to grind that shit out, or you've been grinding it out to try to go for this easy win. Think about that. He's admitted that.
Play, I knew the differences. I knew Vega was even better. I knew Chun-Li was even better. And I also knew that certain characters like Balrog and Old Sagat were not as good in that version.
Which is what he ended up, which is funny because the two characters he looked to achieve the tournament with are the very characters that got him beasted and got him knocked out. Which is hilarious. And there's at least no real proof or anything that anybody would want to go back and look for that says that those three Japanese players had the amount of time that Phil did. So what did they do? They walked into the situation, they survived, they adapted, and they overcame. So all of this extra work that our registered genius here at Super Turbo tried to put in, and he still failed. Miserably. But let's continue.
I played those characters like Vega and did insanely well, while other people didn't practice, just sat there and whined and didn't enter at all, or just complained and never practiced, and they all lost. So if you say that's unfair or it's not legit, I mean, they announced way ahead of time, this is the version that's going to be at EVO. Yes, people complained, but you had plenty of time to practice that version. You know what I mean? That would be like saying,
no, those people just chose not to play it. Those people chose not to play it, or they went ahead and were like, we're not going to take this as a serious tournament. We're just going to go for fun. Is he right? Hey, it was available to all of you guys like it was available to him. He's absolutely correct. But here's the thing. The validation he's looking for, he's not going to get because people had already relegated it down to being a joke. And then you still didn't win. If he had taken first that year, he could have all the rights to gloat and complain and bitch and say, hey, you guys have to treat me. You have to, how do I word this? You have to acknowledge me because I took first place. Now, people can still say what I'm saying now. It was a shitty port and it doesn't mean jack shit to anybody. But you took first. You know what I'm saying? You took first, and you're right. No one can take that away from you. Shit, no one can take away his 4th place finish. But I can still shit on it. I can still shit on it. Everybody can. Everybody did. He's right. Anybody and everybody could have played that shit and learned the differences and so on and so forth. They chose not to because it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. Yet again, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about a tournament that got boycotted. Like, people were legit going out their way to boycott it. And then you had Alex Valle, also known as Uncle Valle, who was going to show up to the tournament strictly the gatekeep to keep piece of shits like him out. Or from getting the free money. Which is what people were calling him out for back then anyway. He knew that the competition was going to be diluted and whatnot. He knew that it should have been easy pickings. Until the Japanese popped up. They call it the land of the rising sun for a reason, Phil. They rise to the occasion. Instead of being the soft underbelly.
We're going to have an NBA 2K tournament, but we're playing the Xbox version at the tournament. But you scream and complain, well, the PlayStation version is the official version, it's the better version, but the tournament says, well, we're playing on an Xbox. So you don't practice the Xbox version, you don't realize maybe the timing's a little different, or there's some slight nuance that's different. Then you go and play in the tournament and lose and you complain about it. Oh, it's illegitimate. It's like, but you knew you were entering an Xbox tournament. So why did you not prepare for it? That's exactly what happened at that tournament. Now the thing is, even at the panel that I spoke about with Mike Watson, Alex Valle, and John Choi, they weren't even complaining. They were like, yo, there was little differences with it that was different than what we were expecting. You know what I'm saying? And we didn't do well. Like, no one's sitting there saying, cry me a river over that dumb shit. It was like, this is the reality and this is what happened. Then Mike Watson's like, but then you got some idiot out there named DSP who's running around saying that he was the #1 ranked player that year. No one's ever said that before, which is the reason why people picked at it. You know what I'm saying? And that shit hurt Phil's ego. I'm not exaggerating, ladies and gentlemen, when he fucking went on a campaign for the next couple years trying to validate that win. Validate that placing. He spent years and thousands upon thousands of dollars doing it. And in a lot of ways, he pushed away a lot of the people who were at least somewhat trying to defend him, right? By wanting respect from the very people he knew he could never get it from. The very supporters he had, he ended up throwing them to the side so he could get validation from people who he was never going to get it from. Does that not sound familiar? It kind of sounds like the situation with the pig cult and the detractors. The pig cult is what keeps him alive. Let's be honest. It keeps him alive, and it keeps one hoof in front of the other. But the detractor community is what he wants the validation from. And he's never going to get it. Ever. Even if, as in what LSP is trying to say, he wasn't that bad at Super Turbo. There's so many other things you could chop Phil down on that he'll never win. But Phil still wants to try doing it. Why? Why would you want validation from people who clearly don't like you? Or clearly don't like how you act? Or how you treat people? Or whatever the case may be? If none of this is going to click in your head that maybe I need to change as a person, then why the fuck are you still trying to get approval from people who you'll never get it from? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's kind of sad, to be honest. And not even just sad in a pathetic sense, it's just kind of sad. It's like trying to make friends with people who clearly don't want to be your friend. Why would you do that? For social standing? For just outright approval? If you can't be happy with yourself, no one will ever be happy with you. Or for you. If you're not strong enough to stand alone, you'll never be strong enough to stand with a group of people who may lean on you when they need it. You're only deluding yourself. Just a little bit of wisdom. Just a little bit of wisdom. You can argue and say that's not legit. Okay, then why is it that for the entire next 2 to 3 years, every Super Turbo tournament I entered, whether it was the PlayStation 2 version, the Anniversary Edition collection that came out. There was like 2 or 3 other versions that every tournament just kept deciding to adopt a new one, adopt a new one. Why was I placing at every tournament after that? It wasn't like, oh, it was a flash in the pan fluke that Phil once placed at EVO and that was it.
But that was what happened. It was a flash in the pan that you could never duplicate. Like, at the end of the day, I'm glad that he admitted it, because this is the one thing that he never really mentions to any of you. His best showings were on ports for the game for consoles, not on the actual cabinets. Whatever locals he won is whatever locals. When you start getting into a nationwide pool and so on and so forth, he just admitted for the next couple of years, all these tournaments were only adopting console adaptations, if you will. And he said that he placed. Congratulations. How many of them did you win? And then more importantly, all of that leads up to EVO. Like, EVO is still the grand stage. And you never got close. So what's your excuse? The reason why people shit on your 4th place finish is because it's the highest you ever got in a tournament that was already considered not taken seriously anyway, and in a port that was absolute trash. And then you couldn't duplicate that later on. You just couldn't. And like I said, like plenty of people have said, why do you want to keep standing on some qualifiers when those qualifiers lead to the main dance that you couldn't get shit done at? Like, the fact that he doesn't see how futile this whole argument is insane. Just take that shit on the chin and keep it moving. Just take it on the chin. He should have let this go years ago. Like, and I mean that, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, over a decade ago, this should have been let go. But you want to know why he didn't? Because he found an audience on YouTube who would actually listen to him, who would actually take him seriously, and who would attack anybody who wasn't following with party lines. He had a much larger audience here than he ever could have in the FGC. Not on Shoryuken.com, not on event hubs, not on what's the other one? Shoryuken.com, Event Hubs, and Capcom United. He was never going to be able to get people to take him seriously on that level. He had to depend on the ignorance of the YouTube audience to continue to keep him fed, if you will, and to keep him getting in, to keep him over. He was basically able to live his delusion with a bunch of people who didn't know, or who didn't care to look. They liked him enough that they were like, all right, fair enough, we'll go on your word and that's it. And that's what it really comes down to. Because if any of them looked like he demands for people to do now, why couldn't, like, it kind of speaks for yourself. You never were able to get any higher. End of story. That was your one shot. And and you missed. And just take it and move off that.
2 to 3 years was dominating the tournament circuit in Super Turbo everywhere I went. There was one year, the year after that, it actually was, I qualified at so many qualifiers for EVO that they had to eliminate some of the qualifications that I had and give it to other people. I went
well, that's gatekeeping. And what did you think? You thought your all those qualifiers were going to stack? Like, think about that for a minute. Did you really think all that shit was going to stack? Matter of fact, in the FGC in 2020, I can't remember what the kid's name was, but there was a dude who had, in Street Fighter V, who had gone to multiple tournaments, or he had gone to multiple online tournaments, whatever the case may be, to qualify for Capcom Cup. And he had won like 3, maybe 4 of those qualifiers. And they were like, okay. And there was another big qualifier coming up, and he said that he was going to enter. And some people were like, well, hey, you've already went to a bunch of tournaments. You've already qualified. Why are you doing this? And you had other people saying, let him go. If he wants to practice, he wants to practice. Because that's all it came down to. The seedings weren't, all of those additional seedings weren't stacking. You ran around and did that for clout. And people called you out for it back then. And so why did you sit there and spend 2006, running around to all these qualifiers, and you still couldn't get it done that year, or in 2007, or in 2008? So what was the point of running around doing all that? Now, yet again, I'm kind of contradicting myself because, hey, maybe GTG, he went for the practice. Cool. Cool. But Phil's vindictive. Phil is pathetic. And Phil's ego and self-worth is so goddamn small that he went to try to show people that I am good and now you have to accept it. But then when EVO came around, where was he at? Nowhere in the top 10. Certainly nowhere near in the top 8. So where was he at then? But that's the very thing he's trying to prop himself up on.
Qualifying for EVO, and I had like 5 qualifying spots for the fucking finals to get seeds, so they gave away 4 of my...
This dude went to 5 majors to collect qualifiers. You guys see the Pebble analogy again? How he sat there and tried to collect all of those up to validate his 2005 placement? He was literally running around trying to collect trinkets for the next 3 years to validate his only shot that he failed at. That's amazing. And we're talking about maxed out credit cards. He put himself into debt for all of this. And what did he get out of it? Really, what did he get out of it?
Spots to other people who had placed under me. But this is what I mean. People want to ignore all that and say, oh, because Phil played a PS1 version, it's illegitimate. Well, no. I played a PS1 version. I played Anniversary Edition. I played the other PS2 version of the game that came out after that. And by the way, I also placed on arcade cabinet tournaments all within a 3-year span. And no one said shit then, but now all of a sudden, let's erase that because we're a bunch of fucking idiots trying to have an agenda instead of looking at the facts. So these people can just go fuck themselves. These are not competitive players who are criticizing my placings. People who were around back then at the time and played against me admitted I was good. Go ask the people I was playing against from the years of 2005 through like 2008 if Phil's good at Super Turbo, and they'll tell you yes. No one's going to say no. Everyone knew it. Top players from all around the country wanted to play me because they knew I was good, and it was a good thing to play the best, to get the best competition in, and to learn the best strategies. It's just dumb shit that idiots make up. Okay. Let's go ahead and, well, Jasper is in front of the TV now. He saw I was busy talking to you guys, and he jumped right on it.
Now, the question of him being good is actually incidental to the entire situation itself. It really is. Like, you being good is one thing. You ran around and tried to make yourself seem like you were greater than what you were. Period. Period. And actually, I thought it was in this clip, but maybe it was in another clip that someone sent me, that he said that, oh, I beat Justin Wong twice. I beat him like at a qualifier in 2006 and a qualifier in 2007. Fair enough. But let's talk about what Justin's situation was at that time. Justin is sitting there playing Marvel's Capcom 2, which is still in the thicks of it. Like, the competition is as thick as it's going to get. He's playing CVS 2, which isn't fucking easy, right? And there's so much bullshit that comes into play with that nonsense. He's playing Third Strike. Like, Justin's playing in multiple games and getting shit done in. He's sitting here in multiple money matches and getting shit done in. Him and Daigo, for sure, back in those days, amongst a few others, had fucking all-day bullseyes on your head. Right? Like, we're talking about in the tournament season in general. How important was an EVO qualifier to someone who ended up winning games at EVO all 3 of those years? I think Justin holds the all-time record for the most EVO wins. What does an EVO qualifier really mean to him? In a game that he's probably going to end up taking top 8 in somewhere down at EVO anyway, if he doesn't outright win it. If he doesn't. And keep in mind, this is back when shit was important. This is the reason why Phil keeps trying to get this validation. Alright, ladies and gentlemen. Give me a second to straighten up. We'll reconvene for final thoughts. And I'll see you guys in just a second. Womp womp. right, guys. All right, so let's close up shop. This right here, like I said, is not the end all be all and whatnot. This is going to be like an ongoing, at least for me anyway, this is going to be like an ongoing thing for this year, for 2021. At least on the Fight Club channel. Yet again, he's not as good as he said he was. Period. That's like the end of this. That's really kind of just, it's not the end of the argument, but it's just that right there is the reality. Now, granted, like I said, we'll still need to go back and we'll actually have to see it. And I'm more than willing to undertake that. For sure. But he certainly wasn't as good as he said he was. And as I had said, there were people who were defending him. There were people who were trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. But these are the same people that Phil would say, in his words, end up turning their backs on him later. You know what I'm saying? That's what it comes down to. Even Gutex and Mike Ross at one time or another may have defended him on that shit. Justin may have defended him at one time or another. You know what I'm saying? But then at the same time, you as the person you're really a piece of shit type of person. And in truth, when you look at tournament standings, right, the few that you can find, he wasn't as good as he said he was, and that's the reality of it. And when he inserted himself into other games like the Third Strike community, like the situation with Triforce, he only did that on the backs of other people who were really someone to be spoken about, or some people who actually had a voice that should have been respected in Third Strike. That was never him. He was never a top player in Third Strike. And if you guys remember that video, excuse me, that was the very thing he called Triforce out on. He's like, who are you to come over to the Third Strike thread and say anything about anything? You're not a top player. Neither are you. If you want to go off that logic, neither were you. What the fuck were you doing there? Because you were cool with a couple of those dudes? Where was your tournament placings at? The only thing he can really talk about is Super Turbo, because that's the only thing he ever devoted himself to. And look at what 25 fucking years did. Look at where it got him. His highest ranking is 4th place at EVO 2005. Period. I don't care about fucking qualifiers. I don't care that he ran around and got 5 qualifiers in 2006 and then had to give them up like he was going to be able to use them anyway. He's not fucking Danzo from Naruto and shit and has a bunch of Shurigans in his fucking arm so he can cast illusions and shit. Sorry, I know that was some nerd shit, but whatever. He's not doing that. If he loses the one guy, he can just go ahead and use another qualifier. That's not the case. That's not the that wasn't the reality. The bottom line is he was good. But he wasn't great. And he was never anything like he said he was. And that the people are sitting here trying to tear that shit down. They were tearing that shit down back then. They were tearing that shit down back then. And you want to know why? Because Phil was an asshole and demanded respect. He demanded recognition. He demanded to be praised up there with the upper echelons of actual winners. And he wasn't a winner. That's the reality. Now, at the end of the day, you can go ahead. People have the right to defend him all he wants. LSB is right. You know what I'm saying? We should give him some credit for what he's accomplished, and bashing him for the sake of bashing him because he's DSP isn't necessarily fair. Cool. But being that you're somebody who restreams Phil playing Street Fighter, you have seen the competition within your own community stand up, right? And step up to the plate. And you've seen how well they've done. Right? And you see the continuing growth that they show. So what the fuck is the point of all this? Where's all of Phil's information? Where's all of his knowledge? Where's all of his experience? Where's all of his know-how when he's getting beaten down by people who would be considered, with no disrespect to LSB or anybody in his audience, who would be considered casuals? You know what I'm saying? That's what they are. A lot of them started playing because either A, they already had a little bit of prior experience and it gave them the reason to pick the game back up, or they picked the game up so they could play Phil and troll him. And actually started playing and started getting good. You know what I'm saying? Look at Goji. Look at Cyberwolf, for example. Or Chaos Wolf, sorry. Look at Chaos Wolf. You know what I'm saying? And according to what happened last night, Goji is more than willing to go ahead and take him on a Super Turbo. And given enough time, I think Goji, sorry. Goji is gonna, Goji Tank, sorry. I don't know well enough to be calling him that. Goji will rise up and overcome. Sooner than later, that's what's gonna happen. You saw how Phil got beasted gets beasted with Sean? And Sean's supposed to be the bottom of the tournament rankings. Phil is quick to run to the whore top tiers. And he's gotten beasted multiple times, at will, at times. In almost the same type of fashion that you saw from Evil AJ in a lot of respects. So you've already seen that within your own community. So how much credit are you still going to, or not credit, but how much do we still need to try to baby Phil on this bullshit? Not to say that LSB is babying him, but you know what I mean. Like, how much credit does anybody really have to give him? Are we really bashing Phil for the sake of bashing Phil? Or is perception not reality? What he was back then is whatever, to be honest. You know what I'm saying? His tournament results in his lack of being able to repeat shows that. But look at him now. And to be honest with you, a lot of the bitching and complaining that you hear is no different than the shit excuses he used to make at tournaments. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, dude, it's all about just trying to open up the conversation and whatnot. It's not, this isn't a direct bashing of anybody in general. It's just opening up a conversation. Call me I'm a hater, so it's whatever. For me, it's whatever. But what do you guys think? You know what I'm saying? Is it that we're bashing Phil for the sake of bashing? Is he really as good as what he says he is? Do you guys need more evidence? You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. Let me know. Like I said, none of us, I don't think there's anybody who's right or there's anybody who's wrong. I think the reason why Phil is considered a laughing stock in the FGC is because he put himself in that position. No one owes you anything, whether you win a tournament or you place high or whatever the case may be. But Phil was so desperate for recognition. He was so desperate for that clout and for that respect and to be spoken of in the way of Justin Wong, in the way of Daigo, in the way of these top players, that he was willing to take whatever little he had and try to squeeze as much of it as he could out. Sorry, buddy, the toothpaste tube was empty. You know what I'm saying? Sorry, you're all out of body soap or whatever the fuck it is that you wash with. Which, granted, he only takes a bath once a fucking week anyway, so you shouldn't be out of anything. You did it to yourself. You did it to yourself. Even if the people back then, well, not to say even, but the people back then who were willing to say that, yes, Phil is a good player. You weren't a great player. And eventually those people ended up walking away from you either which way. Because the people that Phil wanted to be acknowledged from, he didn't get it. Because they didn't owe him nothing. They didn't owe him nothing. But anyway. Like I said, this will be an ongoing discussion, I suppose. Like I said, big ups to LSB and to Rocky and whatnot. Big ups to everybody in the FGC or the Tractor FGC community and whatnot. Big ups to all those dudes. You know what I'm saying? And so on and so forth. And keep watching. And make sure you keep watching the restreams. You know what I'm saying? Whether you're watching it through LSB or DarkDave Mirrors or Agent Proper when he's doing it or whatever, and you can see it for yourself. You can see the growth that these trolls, right? Well, the Tractor FGC are making and whatnot, or just the regular players that we don't even know. You can see the growth that they make week in, week out. Phil is slowly but surely slipping, and he knows it. He knows it. He knows he's slipping. What little he has, he doesn't have. Yeah. Well, what little he has, he doesn't have. He really don't. It's slipping right through his hooves. He knows that. He knows that. And how would you feel if you sunk 25 years of your life into a game and tens of thousands of dollars when it's all said and done, and you got nothing to show for it but a 4th place finish at EVO on a shitty port that no one gave a fuck about, in a tournament that people only treated for fun? How would you feel if that was the shining fucking the shining pinnacle of your tournament experience? Yes, congratulations, you won some locals. Yes, congratulations that you placed high in some majors. Congratulations that in 2006 you went to 5 different EVO qualifiers or majors that were EVO qualifiers, and you won 5 times. Which, now I think about it, he didn't even have to win those tournaments to actually get a seeding. I think that went to like the top. I think he could have gotten tops. He could have gotten qualifying. He could have qualified for just being within like the top. He had to somehow be in the top 8. It's not like, you know, the person who takes first place gets seeded. I think it's anybody within the top 8 of that tournament could have gotten seedings. So that's something to think about as well. But what have you. I have cut my slabs of bacon off for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening in. I very much appreciate it. And I'll see you guys for the next one and whatnot. Hopefully you guys' day, your week is going well and so on and so forth. And I'll see you guys when I see you. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the Snort Report, and this is DSP News. Always late, never breaking. Unreliable coverage that you can't count on. Oh yes, a GTG Network and Productions. For Hard Snorts Gin and Tonic. Take care of yourselves, guys. Oh boy. And someone tell Phil to keep them angry snorts up, because I am going to have a blast going through his FGC history and cutting that shit the fuck up. So let him know. Later, people.